When a racist gang attacked me, I had only one protector by my side, my dog. But what they didn't expect was that this dog was a retired K-9 police officer. That night, they learned the most unforgettable lesson of their lives. My name is Grace Harper, I'm 65 years old, and I've lived in this neighborhood long enough to know when something feels off. Usually, it's peaceful here, tucked away from the noise of the city. But sometimes, that quiet can turn into something unnerving. Every evening around 9 o'clock, I take Max for a walk. It's a small routine we share, just him, me, and the cool night air. Max isn't just any dog. He's a German Shepherd, big enough to intimidate strangers and smart enough to outwit those who know him. What makes him truly special, though, is his past. He used to be a police K-9, retired after an injury, and I was lucky enough to adopt him. He's not just my companion, he's my shadow, my protector. That night started like any other until I turned the corner. Under the flickering streetlights stood 3 men. Their silhouettes stretched across the pavement, their postures unsettling. Something about the way they huddled together made my stomach tighten. Max sensed it too. His ears perked up, and a low growl rumbled from his throat. One of the men noticed us and smirked, nudging his friend. "Hey, look at that," he called. Out mockingly. "The old lady's out walking her wolf." The other 2 burst into laughter, their voices echoing through the still night. "Maybe she's training it to fetch her groceries." Another chimed in, his laugh sharp and mean. Max moved closer to me, his body tense, his growl growing louder, a clear warning as they started to approach us. My heart pounded in my chest, fear clawing at me, but I held my ground. I'd lived long enough to know that fear only emboldens predators. The tallest of the group tilted his head, his grin widening. "Relax, Granny," he said, raising his hands in mock innocence. "We're just being friendly. No need to sick the guard dog on us." But I knew better, and Max knew best of all. His growl turned into a sharp bark, loud, commanding, and full of authority, like a dare for them to come closer. It was then that I realized this wasn't harmless banter. There was something darker in their eyes. I tightened my grip on Max's leash, bracing myself. Whatever they had planned, they had no idea what they were up against. One of the men reached into his pocket and pulled out something metallic. The streetlight caught it, making it gleam, a blade. Not the kind for cooking, but the kind meant to threaten. "Don't worry, Granny," he sneered, his smile twisted. "This'll be over before you know it." My breath hitched, but I didn't let them see my fear. Still, my legs betrayed me, trembling beneath me. I summoned every ounce of strength to stay steady. Max, on the other hand, didn't waver. His growl deepened, resonating through the air like thunder. His fur bristled, and he stepped forward, placing himself firmly between me and them. The tallest man laughed, shoving his friend. "What's that dog gonna do? Bark us to death?" Max answered with another bark, sharp and echoing down the empty street. This wasn't the bark of an ordinary dog. It was a warning, a challenge. The shortest man, who'd been silent until now, shrugged. "We just need to show her who's in charge, then we're done." But Max barked again, louder this time, taking another deliberate step forward. Every move Max made was calculated, as if he were weighing his options, deciding who to take down first. "All right, Granny," the tallest man said, stepping closer to me. "Call off your dog or—" He didn't finish his sentence. Max lunged forward, stopping just short of him, his fangs bared, a snarl like rolling thunder escaping his throat. The man stumbled back, raising his hands in surrender. Whoa, okay, calm down, bad dog." But Max wasn't calming down. He stood his ground, unyielding, his eyes locked on theirs, ready to defend me at any cost. I tightened my grip on his leash, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Max doesn't back down," I said, meeting their eyes. "So unless you want to find out what happens next, I suggest you reconsider your choices." They didn't know who Max was, but they were about to find out. The man with the blade stepped forward, his grin fading into a scowl of frustration. He raised the weapon slightly as if to make a point, aiming it toward Max. "Let's see how tough your dog really is," he growled, taking another step closer. "Big mistake." Before he could strike, Max bolted like a flash of lightning, his sharp teeth sinking into the man's arm, not randomly, but with surgical precision, as if to say, "I've been trained for this." The man let out a fractured scream that pierced the grim silence of the street. "Get this crazy dog off me," he yelled, his voice trembling as he struggled to shake Max loose. Max didn't let go. The other two froze for a moment, their smug expressions replaced by wide-eyed terror. "What the hell is wrong with this dog?" one of them stammered, his voice tinged with disbelief. Max held firm, pulling the first man off balance and sending him crashing to the ground. A metal object slipped from his hand, clattering onto the pavement and forgotten, as he writhed in a desperate attempt to escape. "Let me go," the man screamed again, his voice cracking with rising desperation. The tallest of the group snapped out of his stupor, rushing forward. "We need to take it down," he barked, grabbing a wooden plank from the ground. The third man hesitated, clearly reevaluating every life choice that had led him to this moment, but ultimately followed suit, muttering under his breath, "This dog ain't normal." They charged toward us, their movements frantic, but Max stood his ground. His body was taut with tension, his sharp eyes cutting like blades. "Max, watch out!" I shouted, stepping back. As one of them swung the plank in our direction, Max reacted in an instant, dodging the swing with effortless agility. He released the first man, pivoting sharply, and lunged at the tall one with a fierce growl, slamming into him like a linebacker. The man hit the ground with a heavy thud, gasping for air as Max towered over him, bared teeth gleaming in the dim light, daring him to try something. All right, I give up," the man whimpered, raising his hands in surrender. The third man, clearly out of his depth, stood frozen, eyes darting between Max and me as if he'd stumbled into a nightmare. "This isn't a regular dog," he whispered, his voice trembling. And he was right. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a former police K-9, trained to handle situations exactly like this. But the fight wasn't over yet. These guys weren't ready to quit, and Max wasn't done proving what real strength looked like. It all happened so fast. The two remaining men shook off their hesitation and charged at us. One wielded a rusted metal pipe, swinging it with all the force he could muster. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice edged with panic. But Max wasn't caught off guard. He sidestepped the swing with lightning reflexes, moving with precision honed through years of training. The man stumbled forward, off balance from his own clumsy strike, and Max wasted no time. With a sharp bark, he lunged forward, forcing the man to drop the pipe. "Are you kidding me?" the man yelped, his voice breaking as he stumbled backward, his bravado crumbling. Meanwhile, the third man, thinking himself clever, tried to sneak up on me from behind. Big mistake. I felt a light tug on my shoulder and whirled around just in time to see him reaching for me. My heart pounded, but instead of fear, a surge of adrenaline took over. I gripped my bag tightly and swung it with all my strength. Fwek! The bag struck the side of his head with a satisfying thud. "Don't even think about it, pal," I snapped, my voice sharp with defiance. He staggered back, clutching his head, his face contorted in pain. "What the hell, lady?" he shouted, more indignant than hurt. Meanwhile, Max had dealt with the man wielding the pipe. After disarming him, Max charged forward, knocking him flat onto the pavement with a force that seemed impossible for a dog. The man let out a shrill yelp as he hit the ground, while Max stood over him, teeth bared, a low growl rumbling from deep within his chest. "Get him off me! Somebody help!" the man shrieked, his voice hoarse and stripped of all bravado. The third man, still rubbing his head, looked between me and Max, his face pale as a ghost. "What kind of madness is this?" he muttered, taking a cautious step back. "What took you so long to figure that out?" I shot back, gripping my bag like a makeshift weapon. The man pinned under Max squirmed desperately, his voice now pleading. "Enough. Put him off. I'm done." Max didn't budge. His gaze stayed locked on the man, predator sharp, making it abundantly clear who held the upper hand. He didn't attack further, but the message was clear: don't even try it. "Max, stay," I commanded firmly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The other two exchanged a glance, doubt and fear written all over their faces. A moment of silence stretched between us, but I knew this wasn't over yet. The chaos finally reached its peak. Max had one man pinned to the ground, another was staggering backward after receiving a not-so-gentle reminder from my bag, and the third, well, he'd lost all hope. He turned tail and ran as though his feet were on fire. I considered letting him go, but Max? No, Max wasn't one to let the game end so easily. In a split second, he launched himself like a missile. The man barely managed 10 steps before Max cut him off, standing firm like an immovable wall. The man froze, hands raised in surrender, as if he'd stumbled into an unexpected police checkpoint. All right. Give up, he shouted, his voice cracking. Call off the dog, please. Max didn't budge. He stood there, eyes sharp as knives, tail rigid, his body language clearly stating, "You're not going anywhere, buddy." As for me, I pulled out my phone. My hands trembled slightly, but I felt more confident knowing the situation was under control. I dialed the police while keeping a watchful eye on the other two men, both still within Max's growling range. "Hello, I need the police at Parkside Avenue," I said firmly. 3 men tried to attack me, but my dog stopped them. "They're still here." One of them, still lying on the ground, groaned loudly. "All right, lady, we surrender." "Your dog's nuts," he shouted. I glanced down at him, raising an eyebrow. "Nuts?" "No, that's just years of training," I replied, my tone sharp as a blade. The third man, still standing with his hands in the air, let out a heavy sigh. "This is all your fault, lady. If you hadn't..." I cut him off with a glare so piercing that it silenced him mid-sentence. "My fault?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh no, this isn't on me. This is..." What happens when 3 grown men think it's a good idea to mess with a 65-year-old woman walking her dog? "This isn't my mistake, it's your bad decision," I added, locking eyes with the group. Max let out a short bark as if to say, "Exactly." The man on the ground groaned again, clearly realizing there was no quick escape from this predicament. "Just let us go. We've learned our lesson, I swear," he pleaded. I tilted my head, pretending to consider it. Let me think." "No," I said flatly. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder. I crossed my arms, staring at the 3 men. "You picked the wrong grandma to mess with," I said with a faint smile for emphasis. Max stood tall, his eyes locked on the man before him, his posture saying, "It's over, guys." The wail of police sirens filled the air, and within seconds, 2 patrol cars pulled up, their red and blue lights casting a vivid glow over the street. The men stared at them as though witnessing their worst nightmare come to life, which, to be fair, wasn't far off. The first officer stepped out, scanning the scene before stopping when his eyes landed on Max, still guarding the ringleader. For a moment, his professional demeanor slipped, and he burst into laughter. "No way, this is Max?" he said, genuine amazement in his voice. Max glanced at him, his tail wagging slightly as if to say, "Yep, it's me. Took you long enough." "You know this dog?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. The officer chuckled, crouching to get a better look at Max. "Know him? I worked with him when he was in the K-9 unit. Best dog we ever had, caught more criminals than half the squad combined." The second officer, younger and clearly new, stared at Max as if he were looking at a legend. "Wait, this is the Max from those training videos?" he asked. "That's the one," the first officer replied, shaking his head in disbelief. Meanwhile, the men on the ground began protesting. "This is ridiculous. We didn't do anything wrong," one of them shouted, trying to stand. Max barked sharply, and the man froze, dropping back to the pavement as though he'd just remembered who was really in charge. "Right?" the officer said, pulling out his notepad. "And your buddy waving a sharp object around was just for fun, huh?" "I wasn't gonna use it," the man stammered, his voice breaking. I mean maybe it looked like I was." The younger officer pointed to a security camera mounted on a nearby building. "Let's see what the footage says about that." I couldn't help but smirk as I watched panic flash across the men's faces. They knew they were out of options. As the officers began cuffing them and loading them into the patrol cars, the first officer turned back to me. "Ma'am, I have to say, you and Max handled this better than most people would. Without you two, this could have ended a lot worse." I shrugged, lightly patting Max's head. "I'm not alone," I said. "He's the real hero." The first officer chuckled, shaking his head. "It's funny, Max always knew who the bad guys were, even back then. I doubt that's changed." As the police car drove off with the three troublemakers, couldn't help but feel a strange blend of relief and pride. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a protector, a partner, and clearly, still a legend. "Let's go, buddy," I said, gently tugging on the leash. "Homeward bound." And with that, we left the flashing lights behind, ready to let the chaos of the night become a thing of the past. The next morning, it seemed like the whole neighborhood, and half the city, had heard about what happened. Local media buzzed with headlines like "Elderly Woman and Heroic Dog Take Down Attacker" and "Former K-9 Officer Saves the Day." I hadn't expected the attention to be so overwhelming, but clearly, the story from the officer's statement had spread fast. Once people found out about Max's past as a police dog, the story was practically written before I even finished my coffee. By the time I was halfway through breakfast, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a team of reporters and camera crews setting up camp right in front of my house. "Ms. Harper, may we get a statement?" one reporter asked, holding a microphone out to me. Another added, "How does it feel to have a dog called the local hero?" Max, ever the professional, stood tall beside me, ears perked as though ready for the shot. I adjusted my robe, trying to maintain composure despite the chaos around us. "Well," I glanced down at Max, "I think I feel a lot better than those idiots from last night." The reporters laughed and jotted notes, snapping pictures of Max, who looked like he fully understood what was going on. "Ms. Harper," a reporter asked, "what would you say to those calling Max a hero?" I smiled. "I'd say they're absolutely right, but honestly he's just doing what he's always done, protecting people, doing his job. That's just who he is." All day, packages started arriving at my door, dog treats, toys, even handwritten thank you cards from strangers. One package contained a shiny new collar with a tag that read, "Max Hero." "You're famous now, buddy," I said, holding up the collar for him to see. Max's tail gave a brief wag, but he maintained his calm demeanor as if saying, "Yeah, I know. I deserve it." That afternoon, a neighbor came by with her little girl, who shyly handed me a crayon drawing of Max standing under a superhero cape. "Thank you for keeping our neighborhood safe," the little girl mumbled. Max leaned down and licked her hand, and I felt my heart warm. "That's why we're here," I said, scratching behind Max's ears. As the sun set, the reporters finally left, and the house fell quiet. I sat on the couch with Max beside me, scrolling through social media posts about our adventure. Comments like, "A legend," and "Can we build a statue of Max in the park?" were popping up all over the feeds. "Not bad for a former cop," I said, leaning down to kiss Max's head. He looked at me with a gaze that seemed to say, "Just another day at the office." Justice had been served, and Max certainly deserved a good night's sleep. A few weeks later, I was walking Max down our usual route when I spotted a shiny new sign on a post at the corner where it all happened. The sign read, "Here, Max, the courageous dog, protected his owner Grace Harper with bravery and loyalty." I stopped and stared at the sign for a moment before looking down at Max. Just the air, completely unaware of his newfound fame. "Look at this, buddy," I said, patting his fur. "They made a sign for you. Looks like you're important now." Max wagged his tail, looking at me as if to say, "I told you I'm special." The neighborhood felt different now, safer, more connected. People waved as we passed by, and a few kids ran up to pet Max, calling him Superdog or Legend. As for me, life had mostly returned to normal. I still walked Max every evening and enjoyed my morning coffee on the porch. But that night, I still felt the weight of that moment, not just because of what had happened but because of what it reminded me about courage. Courage isn't just about strength or fearlessness, it's about trusting those who stand beside you. It's knowing you're not facing everything alone. And as for those three, I can only hope they got the clear message: never mess with Grace Harper and her dog. As we walked back home, I glanced at the sign one more time, smiling to myself. Max walked beside me, calm and confident, ready to face whatever challenge came next. Because if there's one thing I learned from that night, it's that sometimes the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected heroes. And in this story, Max was the hero we all needed. It wasn't just about the strength of a retired K-9 or the determination of a 65-year-old woman. It was about the untapped courage that resides within all of us. Fear, while overwhelming, can be a call to action. It sharpens instincts, galvanizes resolve, and reveals the extraordinary in the seemingly ordinary. Grace's story doesn't end here. It's just one chapter in a world brimming with tales of quiet defiance and unexpected heroism. Each story carries its own pulse of fear, triumph, and humanity, waiting to be uncovered and shared. If you've been moved by Grace and Max's journey, imagine what other stories lie just beyond the surface. Stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us all of the strength we hold when faced with adversity. These are the moments that connect us, the truths that resonate long after the tale is told. The road ahead holds more than you expect. More bravery, more lessons, more reminders that courage isn't about the absence of fear, it's about rising to meet it. So stay tuned. Dive into the stories that awaken your curiosity, stir your heart, and remind you why we tell them in the first place. The next one might just change how you see the world. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.